Welcome to the fifth installation of the Intergenerational Dialogue Series, organized by the Social Cohesion Thematic of the Center for Poverty Analysis. To start off today's proceedings, I take this opportunity to call upon our Executive Director, Dr. Herath Gunatilake, to make the opening.
Thank you, Tamindri. This is the first public event I am participating as the director, Executive Director of CEPA. First of all, I would like to welcome you all, especially our panelists, CEPA staff, and others who have joined this event through the internet. I warmly welcome everybody. And as Tamindri mentioned that this Intergenerational Dialogue Series was started, I think, in 2019. So this is the fifth event. And today we are discussing, our focus is basically on a very, very important issue. It is understanding economic justice. I think we should underscore the importance of this topic, particularly at this time. I think as we all know, Sri Lanka declared bankruptcy some time ago, and now we are eagerly waiting for IMF bailout package to be approved, and then we are currently undertaking some of the reforms that are required for IMF to approve its bailout package. And all these, reforms and the actions taken recently have very, very, significant implications on the poor people in this country. In fact, poverty has now increased substantially from 3-4% up to 26%. And I think in the future, my personal assessment is that it might even increase up to something like 40%. So we are dealing with large portion of our population who are living in poverty. And then in the meantime, we are undertaking some very serious economic reforms. Those should have been undertaken a long time ago. And now we have taken accumulated actions like tax reforms and electricity tariff increase and all, gradually we should have done, but we are taking that. The impact of that, especially on those poor and vulnerable segment of our population, is immense. So, therefore, our discussion about the economic justice is really, really important. Now, let me just, say a few words about how economists, I think I am a minority here, I don't know how many economists, all are other social scientists, how economists look at the economic justice. Let us look at what is economic justice, as this long definition says. It says that a set of moral principles for building economic institutions, which is one of the key words, the ultimate goal of which is to create opportunity for each person to create a sufficient material foundation upon which to have a dignified, productive and creative life. Sometimes economists make things very complicated. To complicate this further beyond basic economics, I think just to explain it a little bit further, I quote something from World Health Organization, how it defines a healthy individual. It simply says that you're not having a disease. It's not enough to say that you are healthy. Similarly, when we talk about economic justice, actually just basic solvency, just your ability to meet your day-to-day needs and to pay your debts and so on, is just what we meant by solvency. Solvency itself is not enough to say that that person is living in a situation that it is that we can describe it as economic justice. And why should we talk about, of course, as I said, we are in a very abnormal situation in this country right now in terms of the economic management. But even otherwise, in a normal situation, why one should talk about economic justice? We can, justify it based on the economic efficiency itself. Basically, economy will be more successful if it is fair. It is easy to understand that, when economy is not fair, some of the very talented people, sometimes women, sometimes very talented, but poor people will be excluded from the labor force. One simple example. So if it is fair, if everybody had an equal opportunity to take part in the economy become much more successful, more efficient. But beyond that, there's another reason. Of course, when you look at economic justice from an ethical and moral point of view, I think every society should pursue economic justice as a valuable thing. But I'm just talking about looking at it from a little bit more opportunistic perspective. One reason is then where economies are successful. Second thing is, for economy to run, we need some political and social stability. When economy is not fair, it can eventually lead to some social disharmony and instability. So that is another opportunistic way to look at economic justice. And also, if you think about the roots of this concept, probably this word may be a little bit new, but economists have been dealing with this concept from the inception of the economics. That is because the market economic system or pre-market system is basically unable to distribute the wealth in an equitable manner. Depending on the existing institutions, most frequently, the market economy is not equitable. Some segment of the population get a bigger share of the economic outcome. So that's why in economics, we deal with that problem, that in fact justify the government interventions in the pre-market economy. Otherwise, as economists, what we preach is not to intervene in the economy when the economy is going well. So the goal of the economic justice is to create opportunities for all, regardless of sex, race, age, disability, color, creed, national origin, religion, genetic information. I think these are some of the, if economic treat different sexes differently, different races differently, then it is not economic justice. So generally, I think that is where the contribution of social sciences come. In economics, we really reduce everything. We use only one word, equity. But social sciences go beyond and describe those things and, come out with more detailed policy prescription as to how one should deal with this. There are some differences based on sex or age, or race or age or anything like that. And also, some of the basic principles to ensure economic justice are things like universal basic income equality, equal opportunities for employment, equal access to credit. This is a partial list, of course, we can go on adding, but that gives us, so what kind of, economic restrictions we are including in economic policies to ensure economic justice. Now, in terms of policies, most common policies that justify that, ensure economic justice include things like progressive taxation, minimum wage, diversity inclusion, and also any kind of universal basic income related interventions like, targeted cash distribution or subsidies and things like that. This is how the economic policies are attempting to do, ensure the economic justice. Now, if you look at this approach that I have described so far, actually that approach is, I would tag this as a kind of, is built on the concept of entitlement. And also this is the policies that I have discussed and so on, and this description of the economic justice is fine when the economy is running well. For a matured market economy, which is doing well, I think the way I describe economic justice is okay. But when you look at the economy which is in a distress like ours, we should go beyond this concept and think about economic justice slightly differently. But not forgetting about those, but I said we have to add a couple of more elements to economic justice. But before that, before I get into that, I also would like to, use these two keywords. When we talk about economic justice, we can talk about intragenerational justice and intergenerational justice. Now, all what I have described so far is about intrageneration, within our generation, how we make sure that economic outcomes are distributed in a reasonably equitable manner. But when it comes to the intergenerational equity, actually we are getting into a slightly different subject. We are talking about environment and climate change. Now, the present generation's resource utilization will have an impact on the future generations. This is a subject in itself, we can have a separate session. So, but basically, our generation has an obligation to leave sufficient amount of natural capital. That includes our soils, our water bodies, our forests, and our fisheries, everything together we call natural capital. So we have obligations to leave sufficient amount of at least critical natural capital so that basic production process can continue for the future generation to have a reasonable life. And in addition to that, we need to also preserve the environment's absorptive capacity to absorb and assimilate the waste we generate. That is actually, that leads us to climate change, that we have exceeded the environment ability to assimilate and change the carbon dioxide and some other greenhouse gas emissions. So we are ending up with this climate change. So that is another part of the economic justice. I think today this discussion probably we will not talk much about it. Maybe we can have a separate event on this particular topic about intergenerational economic justice. And also let me go to the most interesting part of this discussion is, so how do we apply the concept of economic justice when the economy is in a real stress situation, real economic crisis? Now we all know that we are in a situation where our crisis is actually, we can say, twin crisis, because in one hand, our economy, it does not generate sufficient amount of foreign currency for us to import and service debt. That is one part of the problem. The other problem is we have unsustainable debt situation where our total debt is so huge and our revenue is not sufficient to repay our loans. So now, in a situation like that, what is going to happen is that when a country is bankrupt, then everyone's income will go down. everyone's income will decrease, and everyone will face hardships. As a whole, as a nation, we pay the hardships. We face these hardships. So when we talk about economic justice, we need to make sure that these economic burdens are shared equitably among different groups. Maybe these groups, particularly in Sri Lanka, rulers and public, and different ethnic groups, different age groups, especially pensioners are very badly affected by the current crisis. They have very limited opportunity to adjust their income. They have fixed income. Inflation and that kind of things affect them very badly. So the equitable sharing of the burdens is very important. Again, why it is important? Of course, it has its own value. As civilized societies, we need to do that, this kind of equitable sharing. But beyond that, actually, if we cannot find a way to do this equitable sharing, it will definitely lead to social instability and disharmony. We already see some elements of that is happening in Sri Lanka. If we don't tackle this part very carefully, I think we will be heading to a much bigger political crisis very soon. Now, on that, I would like to make few comments about the taxation and electricity tariff. Now, we all know that our electricity tariffs will increase very significantly. Some of the most recent increase, some of the users who use very few units of electricity, like less than 30 units or so, their prices will increase by 274% or something. So, in principle, I think as economists, I believe that we have to increase electricity tariff. For any economy, you cannot subsidize things forever. You have to recover the cost. Since we did not recover the cost in the past, we are facing this situation. But when you are doing it, but there are big question marks about whether the burden is shared equitably. For example, based on some of the newspaper articles and energy ministers' own, speeches on TV and so on, there is a huge subsidy on apartment buildings. But we did not touch that. While keeping that subsidy, we increase electricity for the poor users. So these are not equitable ways of bearing this burden. The same thing with taxation. I think our taxes were increased. That is also, I think, we cannot avoid as an economist. I'm telling you that we have to pay more taxes. Otherwise, there are two problems with that. One, we should not only increase taxes and augment the revenue, but we also should cut down the government expenditure. Nothing much was so far done on that. And also the political leadership and others should give us some example. Some argue that even if they cut their allowances or something, the amount may be very small. That could be true, but it has symbolic value. If you recall what happened in Thailand in 1998, when they had the financial crisis, citizens donated a lot of gold to the government. That is because they believe that this burden is shared by elites and poor and the middle class, everybody equally. So, but I don't know whether we have any kind of feeling among our public. Because there's a growing feeling that the burden is passed on to the poor, and rich and ruling class is not taking fair share of the burden. Even taxation, I think the problem is that there are a lot of loopholes in taxation system, and before we increase the tax, we should have taken reform measures to increase the tax base. Now, certain category of professionals don't pay taxes, like doctors who do private practice, they don't pay taxes. Their income is not accounted. Lawyers' income is not properly accounted. Big businesses, hardly pay, sufficient amount of taxes. Tax frauds, tax evasion is, by big businesses, widespread. So while those things are there, squeezing only the middle class is not socially acceptable, because sharing the burden is not equitable. That is one thing. That also about taxation. Now, this tax increase is only to increase the tax percentage to 12%. IMF want the government to increase the tax to about 18% of the income, GDP. So I don't know whether the next 6% increase can be done without some proper reforms on the tax base, and then governance in the tax collection sector. The Inland Revenue Department and various agencies involved in tax collection, and there are a huge amount of reforms need to be undertaken on governance. And the second issue is the accountability. Now we know that our economy was mismanaged. Who is responsible for it? I mean, if something goes wrong somewhere, I think there should be somebody accountable. Even I think in this human rights resolution about Sri Lanka, this particular word about economic crimes were included. The idea behind this inclusion is that there should be some justice on this, because if somebody purposely mismanage the economy, I mean, here I would also want to say this, because sometimes when you implement a policy in good faith, it can go wrong sometimes. For example, you can reduce taxes in a recession time, thinking that it might boost the economy. Economic growth will be accelerated due to tax. But if this same tax rate reduction can be done in purposely to support one particular tax bracket, then it is like economic crime. There's a fine line between these two. But if these things are done, then there should be some corrective measures. I mean, I don't believe that if something has gone wrong, like in the justice system, why we put somebody in jail, not because to punish for whatever the thing he did, but to protect the society from that particular individual, doing the same kind of thing. Now, when you think about the future, unless we do these corrective measures, even if we go through this very difficult period, through all the hardships, the same thing can repeat. Unless we correct those problems and create certain institutionalize some measures to increase the accountability of the policymakers and also the government machinery that is implementing these policies, I think we will get back to the same situation. So that's why it is important to look at those issues, and some corrective measures should accompany with these difficult reforms. I think this is all I want to bring out. I'm sure that these panelists are much more knowledgeable than me about economic justice. I think they will bring to the table a lot more valuable information and valuable ideas. And my request to all of you is that, let us, to the extent possible, let us not make that, exchange of ideas only kind of event. If we can come out with some kind of, concrete suggestions, at least certain directions where we can, really enhance the economic justice and that ensure that poor is not completely destroyed in this country during next 4 or 5 years of hard reforms. So with that caution, I thank you everybody, and I wish you a very productive discussion.